Hello, creative humans. Welcome to the F Lines podcast, the show where we talk about creativity, minimalism, and how to stay wildly functional in a distracted world. I am in a very joyful mood right now because I just talked about joy on Kathy's podcast, the Go Firestarter podcast. So I'm like ramped up, and now we're going to talk about a less joyful word, iteration. I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to make it joyful. Let's see. What I mean by iteration is really not just being in a habit, being in a rut of doing the same thing over and over again, but figuring out one thing that you can spend a lot of time on, go really deep on, and then every day or every period of a week or a month or whatever, you keep coming back to this idea and you keep evolving on it, whether it's like a skill or something you're working on, mindset or some travel, etc. So I want to talk about that today. But the catch is that I started this challenge where I've been drawing comics every day and people are kind of excited about it. But when they ask me, how did you actually start? How did you go from being a really distracted, confused creative to like actually iterating on something for a really long time? I'm like, I don't know. So I think we should try to figure that out today. Maybe you have some questions for me, Kathy. If you were going to start some kind of challenge or some kind of iteration type of thing, what would be your first question for me?
My first question would probably be, why are you doing this?
Yeah. So here's the origin story for why I started. I went to a networking event. I was introduced by you to this creative director named Christina, and we decided to have creative coffee. But I went home and she wanted to see my portfolio. So I go home and my portfolio is a wreck. And then I kind of look back on the 4 years of that I've been doing in freelancing. And it's like I've been going in this direction, in this direction, in this direction, in this direction. So I've got a million things in my portfolio, nothing consistent. I haven't worked on one skill consistently for any amount of time. So I thought I have to change now. I have to go really deep on one thing. So I forgot what your question was now because I went on too many directions. What was your question?
What was your purpose in doing this?
Yeah. So I felt like if I didn't go deep on something, I was going to spend the rest of my life like a creative octopus. And the world is too competitive for me to accomplish anything as a creative person unless I focus my energy on one thing. Do you feel like that, or are you more of an explorer?
Um, it's a great question. Many years ago, I was at a client site, and believe me, it was like on on the Chesapeake River, and I mean, it was just one of those incredibly wonderful client perks.
Yeah,
And one of the parts of the perks was we all did these personality tests. And the questions, because we were supposed to be bonding,
yeah,
agency client bonding. And the question was, what are you good at? What do you want to do? And where do you see yourself in the future? And almost at least 75 and over higher of people were here, here, here.
yeah,
Sort of like that drawing you just did of
yep,
that. I was in a really tight circle.
yeah,
So while I've always had things I've done that are different in my life, at the core, I've always been a writer and a communicator.
yeah,
So when you talk about yourself as doing multiple different things, I actually don't see you that way. I see you as having always had this core. I mean, you didn't decide one day that you were going to. I have a friend who, by the way, is a literary agent
yep,
and wonderful. And one day she decided she was going to become a flight attendant.
mm.
And then, by the way, she's now really happy that she's a literary agent. She needed to go off in that direction.
Yeah,
I've never done that. I've always stayed in the circle. So I would say that you've actually stayed within that tighter circle
yeah.
than maybe you think you have, but you've honed in on the things you love about that circle.
What I'm also wondering is if it's almost about not a skill necessarily, but an idea and knowing how to articulate the idea. Because one of the things about starting the challenge for me that I did before I started the challenge was I came up with a name for a company, F Lines. And it kind of brought everything in my life into focus. Like I didn't know who I was before that. I would go to networking events and I would, put on a button-up shirt, and I didn't feel like myself. And I was trying to be all of these people, and a lot of them weren't aligned, and I didn't really know how to express myself. So I think that's really the first step in my journey for embarking on some kind of iterational focus, purpose in your long-term goal in your life. So is there any word?
I did the same thing you did.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had lots of different things that I did, and some of them I did really well, and some of them I was mediocre, and some I actually stunk at, but pretended I did really well.
Yeah.
And I was with someone, and I would always describe all these things, this laundry list of things I did, and the person said, "Oh, well, you're a fire starter." And I went, "Whoa." And that was who I was. I mean,
Yeah.
I like starting things, and I like inspiring other people to start anything. The tool I use is communication skills.
Yeah.
Okay. But who I like to be and who I like to work with,
Yeah.
it's the same way. And I think sort of F the lines is similar in that way, is that you like working with people who are crossing the line or effing the line or whatever.
Yeah.
And you also, that part about yourself of being probably the most pragmatic rebel I've ever met.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're a real pragmatic rebel. So it's, for me, what's interesting about 365 are two things, okay? One is that you had time connected to it.
Yeah.
And it was 365 days. So you chose this amount of time. And that the other thing is that you put it with the word challenge.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, you knew it was going to be a challenge for you to do it continuously. So for you, it was really the repetition of something and the growing on something that moved you forward.
Yeah.
And has kept you focused, which, I mean, I think is really cool.
I think part of what we're saying here is kind of like you have to have that moment where you cross the line and you can't go back. Because a lot of times we don't really close doors behind us. We don't burn bridges. I mean, I'm not talking about burning bridges with people in terms of like ruining relationships or whatever, but when I name my company F Lines, it's like I can't really go back from that, so finding that moment of clarity and then committing to it. And part of that commitment was, meeting up with Christine, and I had to have something for my portfolio, or it was going to be really awkward. I was going to feel worse about myself. I mean, maybe, it would have been fine for her, but it's really about how you feel about yourself. And then making it accountable. So like posting it on Facebook, that I was starting this challenge. And of course, in the beginning, no one cares, right? Because the beginning of the challenge is the most boring part, and no one believes they're going to do it, or they just think you're going to give up. But, having that accountability is probably the most important part for starting. When did you've kind of known who you were before you even had Ghost Firestarter. So was there a line that you crossed in your life?
I think that there are, I'm much better at doing that on a professional basis than I am on a personal basis. Okay. So I very publicly was doing a diet with someone, with a coach, and and committing to doing it. And I've done that a lot. I've never ever got past 90 days. So people often talk about if you can change a habit to do it for a month, it's changed.
Yeah.
Never happened for me. So for me, part of my awe of you is that you're on what, day 200 something, or
208 is today.
208. Okay,
Yep.
so you've been doing the same thing every day and growing from it and not deviating. And I don't think people necessarily know how much you don't deviate from it. So
Yeah.
just to give you an example, I asked Andrew if he wanted to do this really cool thing with me. And he said no. And he said, I can't,
Yeah.
because this is where my energy is going.
Yeah.
And then I asked him another thing, and like, no. So I mean, I've gone after it a couple times, and it's like, no, this is where my focus is. And I think you also knew, I don't like this word, but I'm going to use it. I think you also knew your limitations.
Yeah.
So I think, and I don't even know if I would say it's the limitations, but you knew that
Constraints.
you had X amount of energy. You
Yeah.
knew where the energy should go and where you wanted it to go. And anything else would have been an energy vampire.
Yeah.
Okay. It would have been sucking the energy out of you.
Yeah.
I don't always know that. Okay. So I think part of iteration is knowing that each of us really comes with finite resources.
Mm.
And you knew that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what you're saying is that you have to find sort of like the natural flow for yourself. I mean, one thing that I've learned recently, um, in the spring, I started getting like arthritis symptoms, and so I had to stop going to the gym. And then I tried working out with free weights. I couldn't do that. It was still, like making my joints freaking hurt. So it was like, what's left? And I had to do body weight exercises. I bought a book on body weight exercises. I hated it. I didn't want to do any of the exercises. So I'm like, what am I going to do to keep myself in shape? And one kind of insight for me was that I just love running. Like, I've cultivated this love for running. So that became kind of like my one thing for fitness. And then in terms of actually exercising, I've just been doing this thing where like I literally just, if my muscles aren't sore, I like stand there and like squeeze them, or like balance, or do these weird movements, whatever feels good. And now I don't have to like put all these tasks on a to-do board or a to-do list. I just, whenever I want to work out or feel like working out, I just do it. And so it's created this like natural flow. So if you're thinking about starting like a 365 challenge, part of it is just figuring out what's easy for you. Like what just flows. If you try a diet and you're like forcing yourself to do something, you're never going to make it, through 365 days, let alone 30 days. It's too hard. I mean, life is exhausting and taxing. So you really need to find that thing that goes down to the base of who you are and what you can do easily. And I guess a good test for that is like, what did you really like doing when you were a little kid? You weren't a little kid bench pressing 200 pounds. You were drawing, playing with crayons. And that's where it came from for me. I was drawing comics in school. So when you have those things that are deep and joyful in you, it makes them easier to do when you have to do them every day.
I love that. I mean, I really do like that. And then when when we were talking before about repetition and iteration, one of the things you said that was interesting to me was that you view iteration is not as repetition, but iteration that you're always growing and
Yeah.
you're always changing. Do you mean that you're improving or that you're changing?
Improving, yeah. I mean, you can look at my comics and they're better. The ideas are better now than they were in the beginning. But to me, iteration means changing things, but changing things in a very controlled, intentional way. So like I keep, the stroke weight and the color. I just use one color. I only draw in a square frame. So I have all of these constraints that I put on myself, and creative people are kind of terrified of that because they think it's going to be boring, doing the same thing every day. But what you realize is that when you close some doors behind you, it frees up energy for you to put more energy into specific things. Like, now I focus more on the composition of comics, or just brainstorming the idea. The less time I put into having to draw the comic, the more time I can put into coming up with a great idea. And as you know, strategy is really important. So iteration is kind of about deciding where the best place is to put your energy and closing off the doors that don't make a difference for you.
So the obstacles to iteration then would be not doing what you love, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's also about space and time. If you don't have enough time or energy or passion, you know, beforehand, you're not going to succeed. So you have to figure out a way to kind of bulldoze some space off of your life and figure out what you're going to need. And the answer to that is probably you're going to need more than you think that you're going to need.
I love this topic. You know, it makes me think a lot about where I get stuck. And, you know, we've talked about that before. So I see myself as absolutely somebody who hates habits.
Yeah.
And I hate repetition, and I
Yeah.
always want different. But in many ways, that's because I don't find the joy
Sounds
place.
like you're choosing the wrong habits.
Yeah, well, or I'm seeing a habit as something wrong or
Yeah.
bad or boring, or and what you're doing is redefining that as actually something that's exciting and joyful.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I think of habit, it's like you know,
Ew, a worm. Ew, a gross habit.
you know, because I think we do that with words.
Yeah.
You know, we put, you know, crazy judgment on words. And for whatever reason, and I think it's maybe because I'm a ex-hippie, and not even ex, currently hippie, you know, anything that reeks of doing the same thing over and over,
Yeah.
or repetition or all that, I'm like, you know, shoot me, right?
Yeah.
But you're putting a new life on it. You're saying that as a creative person, you really can explore your creativity and grow your creativity by iteration. And
Yeah,
that's,
by shutting doors.
yeah, powerful thinking
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I think we've
Ooh.
kind of already summed them up, but yeah, just to go back, like the bulldozer, you know, you got to clear that space off. You have to find things that are really deep inside you. You know, for me, it's drawing, and I can do that easily. That's really an important part because sometimes people think about joy, but there are a lot of things that I take joy from that are not easy for me, and I just couldn't maintain them for a year. So looking at what's easy for you, and then accountability is really big. Having some kind of event that will really embarrass you, you know, if you don't follow through. And then also on the joy side, I mean, we just did a podcast about joy, but it doesn't have to just be embarrassment. It could be something really big that you reward yourself with at the end. You know, like I'm going to be able to publish a book at the end, so that's something that would be really joyful to me. So yeah, anything else that you have to add?
No, I think you got it there. And I'll tell you,
I think we
sometimes
iterated
you
well
reiterated
enough on this
and
idea.
iterated
Yeah.
and that. So yeah, thank you for the wisdom. You really got
Yeah.
me thinking on that.
Well, if you guys want to hear more conversations like this between Kathy and I, you can find the F Lines podcast on flines.com or on Spotify or anywhere else, as well as Instagram and Twitter. Where can people find you, Kathy, if they want to experience more joy?
Well, if you want more joy, I haven't got my podcasts up yet because I haven't iterated on them yet. I wanted to use that word as many times as I could. But you can find me at Go Firestarter. You can email me at Kathy at Go Firestarter. I actually like talking with people on email, and maybe we'll even have a Zoom conversation someday.
Yeah.
So, okay. Hey,
All right.
thanks,
Well, we'll
Tanner.
catch you guys next time. Keep iterating and keep finding joy in everything.